We begin the Gemara today on Daf Hey Amud Beis, towards the bottom of the Amud, about 6 lines from the bottom. At the end of the Gemara yesterday, it brought from Rav that said, shiurin, chatzitzin, umechitzin, halacha l'Moshe misinai. The shiurim that we find in Torah, the halacha of chatzitza by tefillah, and the halachas of a mechitza are all learned halacha l'Moshe misinai. So the Gemara will now go through this and discuss this. Frag the Gemara, shiurin da'iraisen inu. The shiurim are all learned out from a pasuk from the Torah. It's not halacha l'Moshe misinai. The pasuk says, describing Eretz Yisrael, Eretz chita sa'oira v'gefen u'te'ena v'rimayin Eretz zeis shemen advash. These are the shivas aminim that the Torah describes that Eretz Yisrael has, these peiros. V'amar Rav Chanan comes and explains, what is this pasuk telling me? So as Mefarshim say, the reason why Rav Chanan is darshaning this pasuk is because earlier the Torah says that Eretz Yisrael is a land ashalei techsa kolba. It doesn't lack anything. We learned in the Gemara in Yuma that it says that Eretz Yisrael has even pilpulin, all kinds of fruits, and everything grows there. So why does it spell out these 7 minim to be special and unique? So Rav Chanan said, Kol ha-pasuk hazeh l'shiyurim nema. It's all teaching me, it's coming to tell me the different shiurim of Torah that are related to the different sizes of these fruits that are mentioned here in the pasuk. And as Rashi it says, this itself is the praise of Eretz Yisrael. That even when it comes to words of Torah, we're estimating the shiurim of Torah in those fruits that grow in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara goes through what each one of the peiros of Eretz Yisrael, the minim, are shiurim for. Chita, when it mentions the Torah, chita, labayis hamenuga. This is relevant for the shiur of a person that enters into a house that has a nega where you become tamei. So over here, there's the shiur of a chita. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, hanichnas labayis hamenuga, a person that enters into a house that has a nega. The kelov al kseifav, and he's carrying his clothing on his shoulders. The sandalov, his sandals, the taboisav, his rings, biyada, he's holding them in his hand. He's not wearing them. So then, hu vehein tmei miyad. The person and his clothing and items that he's holding in his hands become tamei immediately. Because he entered, as soon as you enter into the house, you become tamei. Right? As the pasuk says, that if you come into the house, you become tamei right away. Rashi brings the pasuk, v'haba labayis yitma. As soon as you come into the house, you become tamei. However, hoya lavush kelov, v'sandalov, beraglov, v'taboisav, betzboisav, he's wearing his garments. He's wearing his shoes. He's wearing his rings. So then, hu tamei miyad, he does become tamei immediately because of this pasuk. Habal abayis, he becomes tamei right when he enters. But v'hein tahoirin, but the rest of the items that he's wearing are going to be tahoir achayisha b'chdei achilas pras, until he's going to remain there long enough for the time that it takes to eat a half a loaf of bread. So Rashi here brings, because the Torah says v'oichel b'bayis yechabes v'gaimer, and we learn from this in Torah's Kayanim that it doesn't mean that someone that actually eats there, only then do his clothing become tamei. But what it's referring to is someone that remains there long enough, as long as it takes to eat a suda, then he has to wash his clothing, they become tamei. So if you're holding your clothing as a separate item, so then it comes in together with you, it enters into the house, and it becomes tamei right away. But if you're actually wearing it as garments, so then it's considered to be a worn garment, and regarding that, the Torah says that a worn garment only becomes tamei when it remains there long enough that it would take to eat a suda. And how long is one suda? Pras, a half a loaf of bread, which there's various shiurim for this. It's either 4 eggs, the size of 4 eggs, or the size of 3 eggs. Machlekes about this. So now, this half a loaf of bread, what kind of bread are we talking about, and in what condition is he eating it? So first of all, pas chitin. We're talking about a bread made from wheat. V'loi pasayim, not bread it's made from barley. As Rashi says, made from chitim, it takes shorter to eat than eating from barley. Bread from barley crumbles more, it's not as easy to eat. So that's the chitim that it says here in the Torah, refers to this shiur of achilas pras, but it has to be achilas pras of chitim. And also another detail, meisev oichel, we're talking about someone that's reclining and eating it, and eating the bread. And also belifton. He's reclining and eating lifton, meaning he's not just eating the bread alone, he's eating the bread together with other foods together. So again, this is all details of how long it would take him to eat it. When a person is reclining and eating, so it doesn't take him as long to eat because he's reclining, he's more relaxed. And also if he eats the lifton, it's easier to chew the bread, and therefore it also would not take him as long. So this is the first shiur of why the Torah writes chitim, because it's telling you the shiur of tumah regarding the begadim that a person wears, that it has to be dafke from achilas pras of chitim. Sa'ira, when the Torah writes Sa'ira, what is this shiur relevant for? The Tnan, we learned regarding tumah of a mace, etzem kesa'ira. If you have a piece of a bone of a dead body, so the smallest size to become tameh is if it's a sa'ira, if it's the size of a barley, so then metame b'maga or b'masa, it'll make you tameh if you touch it or if you carry it. Ve'eina metame b'oil. It does not make you tameh if it's in the same tent under a roof together with you. This piece of like a sa'ira will not make you tameh. Then it has to be a larger size. As the Rashi says, has to be roiv, minyan, evarei adam, most of the limbs of the body or the shedder of the person. But regarding touching and carrying, the minimum size is like a barley, which is what we learn from the Sa'ira on this pasuk. The next thing it says in the pasuk, gefen. What is this teaching me? Kidei, revius, yayin, lenazir. This is teaching me according to the opinion that says that a nazir, that's a person that's not allowed to drink any wine. So how much is he not allowed to drink, whether it's wine or the grapes, the peels of grapes, the seeds of grapes? The amount that he's not allowed to drink is the amount of a revius of liquid. How do you measure this revius of liquid? So as Rashi explains, what you do is, if you have a revius of wine and you place, let's say, the peels or the pits of the grapes into that cup, so when there's a revius of wine that spills out, so you know that you put into the cup the amount of peels or pits of a revius. Right? So now Rashi explains the relevance of when the Torah writing gefen is because there's a big difference if you put in a cup of water and it spills out. A certain amount spills out. Whatever you add into the cup, the more spills out. That's water. And then there's it's wine. If you're placing into a cup of wine and the wine spills out because of what you put into the cup, in the wine, because it's a thicker liquid, less will spill out. So the Torah here is saying that when you estimate this shiur of a revius by placing the amount into a cup to see how much you have, you estimate by the liquid of wine, which is thicker, and not by the liquid of water. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. There are other pshatim here in the Gemara. There's a long thesis about this, but this is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Sagt the Gemara weiter. The next thing it said in the pasuk, te'ena. What's the measurement of a te'ena? This refers to a person carrying on Shabbos. The minimum amount that's considered to be significant, that you should be chayav for this, is the amount like a fig. Rimain, and when it says in the Mishnah, Rimain, what is this shiur relevant for? The Tnan, we learned in the Mishnah regarding a keli that's tameh. So then the halach is called keli balebatim. Any keli that's privately owned, shiuron kirimain. The shiur for it to not be considered a keli anymore, if it's broken, that can't serve as a keli anymore, its tumah is gone, is removed. So what is that shiur? How large does the hole have to be? The size of a rimain. If it only has a hole that's as large, let's say, as a zayis, as an olive, so people privately will still use it for other purposes. They'll use it for a larger fruit, like a rimain. They're not going to throw it out. So therefore, it's still going to be a keli, and the tumah is still there. Whereas Rashi says, if this would be a keli that's being sold in a store, even if it has just a small hole, it's not a keli anymore, it will not be sold, and therefore it doesn't have its tumah anymore. But here we're talking about the kelim of balabatim, of people privately. The next thing it said in the pasuk was, Eretz Zeis Shemen, the land that has a zayis. So what do you learn out from this? Eretz Shekol Shiureh Kizeisim. All of the shiurim of Torah are the shiur of a kazayas. So the Gemara asks in that, Kol shiureh so kadaitach? All shiurim of Torah are the size of a kazayas? We have these shiurim that we just mentioned that are not a shiur of a kazayas. So how can we say kol? Ela emes, or rather say sheroiv shiureh kazaysim. A land that most of the shiurim that we learn in Torah are the shiur of a kazayas. As Rashi here brings a whole long list regarding tumas meis, nevele, the isser of chelev, dam, pigel, noise, tamig, danasha. Many shiurim in Torah, the isser is the amount of a kazayas. So that's Roiv Shiurim, and the Mefarshim say that's the reason why it says again over here, Eretz Zeis Shemen, because this is the most chashav shiur of all of them. Then the Torah says Dvash. Dvash is the honey that comes from a date. Kekaiseves Agasa. This is the fat date. B'yoyim HaKippurim. If one eats from this fat date, then that's considered that he broke his fast, and he's not anymore being Mekayim the mitzvah of V'yinisam es nafsheseichem, afflicting your soul. So we have all these shiurim that are all learned from these psukim over here. So the Gemara concludes the question, Alme Dairaiseninu. So I see that all of these shiurim are learned from the pasuk. So how could Rav say that the shiurim of the Torah are a halacha l'Moshe Sinai? So the Gemara says, V'tizbere, is this a question you're asking? Shiurim mi ksivi? Do these shiurim actually say here in the pasuk? Elo, so therefore what we say is, Hilchasaninu. Really these shiurim are a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And here in this pasuk where it talks about the Shivas Aminim of Eretz Yisrael, so Rav Chanan is using it as an asmachta to show that you can see hinted in the Torah these shiurim, but this is not the source. The source is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Gemara goes to the next point. Rav said chatzitzin. So he said that the chatzitza, the halacha of a chatzitza, when you have a separation, something that's not allowing the water to come to every place in the body when you tevel. So over there, that's also, he said it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So the Gemara asks, Chatzitzin dairaiseninu, this halacha of a chatzitza is also min ha'Torah. The chsiv, the pasuk says, v'rachatz es b'sorei ba'amayim, your entire flesh, your entire body should be in the water. Sh'leyehei dava chaitzitz beinoi lebein hamayim. There should be nothing interposing between your body and the water. So it's you see, a clear pasuk. So the Gemara answers, Ki asai hilchase. What did Rav mean when he said that there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai? L'sarai. It refers to the hairs of the person, that every single hair has to be inside the water as well. One hair that's tied, and the water doesn't enter into every part of the hair. Chaytzetzes, that's a chatzitza. Shalosh, if you have three hairs that are tied together, einon chaytzetzes, then it's not a chatzitza, because if it's three hairs tied together, it can't be tied tight enough that the water won't go in between. Shtayim, but then he said if there's two hairs tied together, eini edeya, that I'm not sure about. It's not clear if the water could enter between the hairs or not. So that's what the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is for the hairs. Fragt the Gemara, but sayrai nami dairaisenenu. For the hairs, that's also halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Sorry, that's also learned from a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk says, "V'rochatz es b'sorei b'mayim." So why does it say es? Es hatafel b'sorei. Es comes to say even what's secondary growing in the person's body, the hairs, is also part of the halacha that it has to be inside the water. U'may niyusare, the hairs. So what's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai for? So the Gemara answers, Ki asoi. When the halacha l'Moshe Sinai came, it's for the following. Hilchase, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is look at Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Dvar Torah. So the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is, that's what Rashi explains, the words Dvar Torah here. The whole entire following statement of Rabbi Yitzchak is not learned from the pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk in the Torah says the whole body of the person and all of his hair has to be in the water. However, here there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai as exactly what is considered to be significant enough to be a chatzitza and what not. That's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is rubai u'makpid. If there's a chatzitza on most of your body and it's something that you're particular about, it's dirt or some chatzitza that you want to get rid of, then chaytzitz. That minatayre, that halacha l'Moshe Sinai says that minatayre it's a chatzitza. V'she'ein makpid olav, if it's something that you're not particular about, ein a chaytzitz. That's not a chatzitza. The Gazru, Nachachamim came along with the Rabbanan and made a gzeira. Al rubai, if most of your body has some dirt on it, she'ein makpid, even if you're not particular about it, and they said that you shouldn't tevel that way either, it's not good. Mishum rubai makpid. Not to confuse this with a case where most of your body has a chatzitza and you are particular about it, where over there, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says that minatayra the tefillah is not good, so there was a gzeira, even in a case where you're not makpid, that the tefillah shouldn't be good. Another gzeira, val miyutay hamakpid, if you have a chatzitza on the smaller part of your body, and you are particular about it, so over here as well, there's a gezeira mishum rubei makpid, because you shouldn't confuse this with a case where the chatzitza is on most of your body and you're particular about it. So we have the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and then there's the Gzeira Midrabanan. But now we know what the halacha l'Moshe Misinai was for. The Gemara asks on this, why wouldn't we make the Gzeira a step further to say that even if it's on the minority of your body and you're not particular about it, but still there should be a Gzeira that the Tvila should not take effect? Why? Mishum miyutay makpid. Not to confuse it in the case where the minority of your body has it and you are particular about it, which we said that over there's a Gzeira that it doesn't work. Inami mishum rubai she'ena makpid, or in a case where there's a chatzitza on most of your body and you're not particular about it, and there's a Gzeira that the Tvila doesn't work. So why don't we make a Gzeira, and why aren't we concerned that a person would confuse those two cases with the case where it's miyutai and ena makpid? So even there, you could come to confuse it with these two cases that are asr midrabanan. So the Gemara says, no, so far we don't go. Hi gufe Gzeira. The case where it's miyutai and makpid, or rubai ve'ena makpid, so over there, that's only a Gzeira midrabanan. V'anan neikim v'nigze Gzeira l'Gzeira. We should get up and make one Gzeira midrabanan in order to reinforce a Gzeira midrabanan. That Chachamim never do. This is one of the sources of this famous klal. You never make a Gzeira l'Gzeira. The Torah says, Asu mishmeres l'mishmarti. You make one Gzeira to support a Ism and a Torah, but you don't make a secondary support to support the first Gzeira that Chachamim made. The last item that Rav spoke about before, when he said that there's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, was mechitzin, the halacha of mechitzas, of partitions. So Hada Maran. So this is referring to what we said before regarding a sukkah. According to Rab Meir, the only source for the minimum height of the mechitza of a sukkah that has to be inside this mechitza, a space of 10 tfachim, was a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So the Gemara says, that was Rabbi Yehuda, sorry. So the Gemara now points out, Ha nichel Rabbi Yehuda. So that's true that we're relying on this halacha l'Moshe Misinai according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ela Rab Meir. However, according to Rab Meir, that we said before that we don't need this halacha l'Moshe Misinai for sukkah. We can learn it out from the kruvim, from the height of the kruvim and the wings of the kruvim. So what does it mean when for the mechitza there's halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Which halacha l'Moshe Misinai are we referring to? So the Gemara answers, Ki asai hilchase. What is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai of mechitzas? There are a few details, and we had this before on Daf Dalet. Legud, the halacha of good asik, which is the concept of where you have a platform or on top of a house, and there's 10 tfachim of the height of this platform or house. So we consider the walls of this platform to be as if it is extending upwards surrounding this area. Good asik. We draw it up as if it's surrounding this area. That's one halacha l'Moshe Misinai. V'lavud, also the halacha l'Moshe Misinai of lavud, when you have an area that has an open space less than 3 tfachim, it's as if it's closed up. And also, Deifen Akuma, the halacha l'Moshe Misinai of considering a wall that's less than 4 amas away from where the schach is, that it's as if the wall is curving, the schach, the puzzle schach, is curving, and therefore the wall is connected to the schach. Those are the areas where we have the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Okay, coming back now to the Mishnah. V'she'ein lo shalish tefanis. It said in the Mishnah that you have to have 3 walls for the sukkah. If it's less than 3 walls, the sukkah is possible. So here the Gemara is going to bring a machlokes about this and the source of the psukim for the number of walls that you need for a sukkah. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraisa, shtayim kil chasam. So the first opinion is that you have to have 2 full walls, ushlishis, and then the third wall, afil tefach. Just 1 tefach of a third wall is enough. Rab Shimon says, shalosh kil chasam. You have to have 3 full walls. Urevius, the 4th wall, afil tefach. That could be even 1 tefach. What's the basis of their argument? So, as the Gemara here will explain, this is based on the fact that it says in the Torah 3 times the word basukais. Basukais, basukais, basukais. The only thing is, the first 2 times it says it in the Torah, basukais spelled without a vav. The 3rd time it says basukais spelled with a vav. So the Gemara now will explain this machlokes. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan's opinion is yesh aim l'mesairis. The main thing that you have to look at is the actual letters, the way the tradition of what the letters written in the Torah is, without any nekudais of how you actually pronounce it. Just look at the letters itself. Rab Shimon Savar, Rab Shimon's opinion is yesh aim l'mikra, that the main thing we have to look at is the way it's pronounced. There's the vowelization, the nekudais, and the way it's pronounced, that's the main thing you have to look at. So therefore over here as follows. Rabbanan say, Yeshem l'Mesayres. You have to look at just the letters, the way it's written. So therefore, what does it say in the Torah? If you just look at the letters, so you have Basukas, and Basukois. In other words, the first two times it's written without a vav in a singular term. So that's 1, 2. And then the third time, it says it with a vav, Basukois, so that's another 2. So together you have 4 times where the Torah talks about the building of the sukkah. So Harei Kanab, that's 4. So now, Dal Chad Legufe. One time the Torah writes Basukas, so that you could deduct, and that's not part of the count to learn how many walls you need, because that's, first of all, simply coming to tell me the actual mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. Okay? So now, Pashul Hutlasa. So we're left with another 3 times the Torah writes, once Basukas, and once Basukois with a vav, which is 2, so together that's 3. So therefore we learn out as follows. Shtayim Kil Chasan. 2 of those walls have to be full, complete walls. But then there's also a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that was said here regarding sukkah. V'asoi hilchase. There's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that comes and says regarding the third wall. V'garasa l'shlishes v'ikmosa tefach. And it minimizes the length of the third wall. It doesn't have to be a full third wall. It could be even 1 tefach. That's the opinion of the Rabbanon. So they follow Yesh Eim L'Mesayres, Basukas, Basukois, and we end up with 2 walls and 1 tefach because of halach l'Moshe Misinai. Rab Shimon's opinion is Yesh Eim L'Mikra. The main thing you have to look at is the way it's actually pronounced. And therefore it's really Basukois, as if it says a vav by the other 2 Basukois as well. So therefore really Harei Kan Sheish. Over here you have in the Torah, it's telling you 6 times the expression of the building of a sukkah. So now, Dal Chad Kra. So we deduct 1 pasuk, Legufe. One time the Torah wrote Basukais to tell me the very mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. So that takes off 1 whole word Basukais, which really includes 2. So Pashuluhu Arba. So that leaves me with another 2 times that the Torah wrote Basukais. So that's 4 walls. So therefore now we learn out as follows. Shalosh Kil Chasan. 3 of these walls have to be 3 complete walls. But now there's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that minimizes 1 wall to be only a tefach. Asai hilchase v'garasa l'revi'is v'ikmasa tefach. The halacha l'Moshe Misinai comes and minimizes the 4th wall and says that it only has to be 1 tefach. So therefore, if you follow Yesh Eim L'Mikra, you're going to end up with 4 walls, the 4th wall being 1 tefach. This is one approach. The Gemara is going to give us a few alternatives over here, how we could explain this machlokes. Or if you want, I could explain you this machlokes differently. The Kul Alma, everybody agrees, Yesh Eim L'Mikra, that the main thing you have to look at is the way the pasuk is actually pronounced. Basukais, as if it's all written with a vav. And Vahacha Kamiflagi. So here the argument is as follows. So as we said before, 1 basukais we deduct because that's for the very mitzvah. So you're left really only with twice basukais, which leaves us with 4 walls. So now what they're arguing over here is as follows. Mar Savar. So the Tanakama says, Schacha Boikra. You actually need also 1 time, 1 basukais, or 1 part of basukais to teach me that the schach, that the sukkah has to have schach. So therefore you're only left with 1 basukah is for 1 wall and the other basukah is for another 2 walls. So you're only left with 3 walls, and then the halacha l'Moshe Misinai minimizes 1 to be a tefach. Omar Savar, Rab Shimon says, Schacha le'boikra. For the schach, you don't need an extra pasuk to say that it has to be the schach. It's self-understood from the word sukkah. Sukkah means schach. So therefore for that you don't need a pasuk. So therefore you have twice basukais, which is 4 walls, and then you minimize 1 because of the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, so that's 3 walls and a tefach. Another alternative how to explain the machlokes of the Rabbanon and Rab Shimon. Or if you want, I could say the Kul Alma Yesh Eim L'Mesayres. Everybody agrees that you go according to the Messiah of how it's actually written, just the letters how it's written. So that's basukas, and then basukois. So Vahacha Miflagi, and here the argument is as follows. They're actually arguing about this halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding the walls of a sukkah. What did this halacha l'Moshe Misinai come to say? Marasava, one opinion is Ki asai hilchas legroya. The Rabbanan say the halacha l'Moshe Misinai comes to minimize From the pasuk we see 3 walls. The halacha l'Moshe Missinai comes to say that third wall could be only a tefach. Omar Savar, and Rab Shimon says, Ki asoi hilchas elohaisif. The halacha l'Moshe Missinai came to add a tefach. From the pasuk we see 3 walls. The halacha l'Moshe Missinai is to be machmer, to add another tefach of a 4th wall. Finally, the last alternative of the explanation here of this machlokes of Rabban and Rab Shimon, V'bay Seime, or we can say the Kulam, everybody agrees, Ki asoi hilchas legareya. The halacha l'Moshe Missinai comes to minimize one of the walls to be only a tefach. And also, V'yesh aim l'mesairis. And everybody agrees that the main way is to read the pasuk as the main drasha we darshan is the way it's actually written. Basukas, and then basukos. And v'hacha, so what's the machlokes here? B'dershin tchilois kamiflagi. They're arguing that first time it said basukah, so we said before that one pasuk we have to deduct because that's coming to tell me the very mitzvah itself of sukkah. That's the beginning. That's the very mitzvah itself. But now the Gemara says that itself is actually the machlokes. Mar Savar, one opinion is that Rab Shimon says Darshan Chilois, even though that is the main mitzvah that the pasuk is writing it for, but we still could also use it as part of this drasha to determine how many walls there have to be. Omar Savar, but the Tanna Kama says Ein Darshan Chilois. We don't darshan if it's there to tell me the main mitzvah, that's the beginning, telling me, introducing what the mitzvah is. We don't darshan that as part of the number of the walls that are intended for the sukkah. So as the Mefarshim, the Pnei Yeshua, I believe, explains there, usually this wouldn't be an argument. If it has to be, Gemara always says, Legufe, this is what I need for the very mitzvah itself. But over here, there's one opinion that holds that it's not a contradiction, because we're not really coming to mamish bi mechadash anu halacha here, but we're just coming to look at the number of times that the Torah writes the word in order to determine the number of walls. So here there's a machlokes whether we could include it in the number or not. Now the Gemara brings another source for Rab Shimon's opinion. Rav Masna says, Taimeh de Rab Shimon, the reason for Rab Shimon's opinion is mehacha, from the following pasuk where it says that the sukkah tia letzel yoimam, the sukkah will be for you as a shade daytime mechayrev, from the heat ulamachsa lemaster, and it will be as a protection and conceal you mizerem umimoter, from the wind and from the rain. So therefore, according to Rab Shimon, that requires 3 walls and a 4th wall of a tefach. As Rashi says, because otherwise the wind is going to come in, even if it's going to be the shade from the schach you'll have there, but the walls have to be there in order for not to allow the wind to come in. So for that you have to have 4 walls.